10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy.
What, you think you're better than me? Bring that shit, Kazuma! 10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy. 10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy. What, you think you're better than me? Bring that shit, Kazuma! Fucker! Bring that shit, Kazuma! 10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy.
Man, feels weird to play a Yakuza game that isn't Zero after only owning it and the Ishin remake for so long, yet here we are. Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the very first game in the series, releasing in 2016 in Japan, and later 2017 for everyone else. For the sake of this video, I'll be treating this as a standalone game for the most part since the original Yakuza is inaccessible outside of emulation. Maybe one day I'll play it though. After playing Kiwami for the first time, it's undeniable that you're meant to play it right after Zero. The glitz and glamour of the bubble era are now gone, leaving Kamurocho looking a lot less colorful than before. Of course, it's still as seedy as ever, perhaps even more so. In the center of the map, the newly erected Millennium Tower stands tall where the empty lot used to be, a living embodiment of the people who died to give it to Sarah. Both of these things give off the feeling of unfamiliarity despite being the exact same map from the previous game, a fitting feeling given Kiryu's trip for the joint for 10 years. Speaking of, this time around, Kazuma Kiryu is our only playable protagonist, with Majima being demoted to a side character. The lovable Mad Dog still gets plenty of screen time though, for better or for worse. In many ways, this game feels like a DLC expansion to Yakuza 0, most notably the combat, with the only major difference being the story told. So is this game worth the price, or is it just a cash grab disguised that's a modern way to experience the original story? Only time will tell. As I just mentioned, Yakuza Kiwami's combat is the closest tie it has to Zero, using the same styles for Kiryu. There isn't even a proper tutorial for them other than the game saying, hey, you can switch styles. Hence why it feels like this game is made to be played after it. Although, there are some differences that make this game unique. For example, instead of there being 3 bars of heat, you now only have 1 that can be upgraded to be longer throughout the game. On top of this, there are several upgrades that allow you to seamlessly switch between the styles without an animation slowing you down. Because of this upgrade, I found myself using basically all of the styles in a given combat encounter rather than relying on 1 or 2 like I did before. Upgrading them is still the same for the most part. Instead of money flying out of their pockets, you simply gain experience that you use in the skill trees. Still works the same though. However, this time around the Dragon and Dojima style doesn't start off fully upgraded and you can't spend experience points on it. Instead, the main way of gaining skills is the Majima Everywhere system, something I'll elaborate more later on in the video given I have a decent amount to talk about with it. For now, let's focus on Totaro Komaki. Reprising his role as one of the teachers from the previous game, something I didn't mention then but will now. Komaki teaches Kiryu various skills from the Komaki lineup in order to bring out the dragon now staying away for 10 years. These skills range from a roll to aid in evading attacks, special heat moves, and the one and only Tiger Drop. To use it, you have to time it just right so you attack the enemy just as theirs is about to hit you, sending them flying off screen. It's incredibly busted, and makes this version of Kiryu insanely powerful. Most enemies stand no chance once you fully upgrade it. Unfortunately, the rest of the styles become obsolete after this. The only reason you would use them would be for the special boost or the heat move to prevent them from recovering too much health. Even then, you can still use the weapon to bypass this special heat action requirement. The combat is a definite upgrade over Yakuza 0's. but the lack of a second playable character makes it far less likely you choose her to play Kiwami over Zero. Perhaps the story makes up for that. Much like the previous entry, Yakuza Kiwami centers itself around a conspiracy, only this one focuses on 10 billion yen that suddenly went missing. Kiryu unfortunately gets dragged into this mess and encounters new and old faces alike as he attempts to uncover the truth. If he is unable to regain his lost strength after spending 10 years in the joint, then he'll be just another victim to the chaos that ensues from a Tojo clan civil war. For most of the entries from this point onward, I'll talk about the characters as I see fit because even the games that have multiple protagonists have a lot of recurring characters that play a role in several of the protagonist's stories. With that being said, let's start with our one and only protagonist for this journey in Kamurocho. Kazuma Kiryu has grown a lot since the last time we saw him, having made a name for himself as the one and only Dragon of Dojo, mainly because of the tattoo on his back. As I mentioned before in the Yakuza 0 video, it depicts the Oryu dragon. In Asian mythology, the dragon is viewed as the top of the food chain, the apex predator very few could even compare it to. From the moment it was first inked, it was clear that Kiryu was destined for great things, even if he has to endure countless tragedies along the way. But that's in the future. For now, life is going pretty well for him, Nishiki, and the love of his life, Yumi Sawamura, to the point that Kazuma is considering putting Kiryu in charge of his own family. All of the success unfortunately comes to an end when Nishiki murders Dojima for trying to sexually assault Yumi. Kiryu decides to take the fall for his brother, spending 10 years in the joint. In 2005, he is finally released into an unfamiliar Kamurocho, yet his allies catch him up to speed on what happened in his absence. As he attempts to meet with Kazuma, the patriarch is shot, forcing Kiryu to flee from the Shimano family straight into Makoto Date. Together, the two of them pursue any available leads of what happened to the missing 10 billion yen, eventually running into the supposed daughter of Yumi's sister Mizuki, Haruka. Throughout his journey, the dragon witnesses many of his closest friends and allies die before he can save them, including Kazuma himself. Before his father figure dies, he passes on Chairman Sera's will to Kiryu, entrusting the future of the Tojo clan to him as its fourth chairman. In spite of everything he has gone through, Kiryu finally gets a chance to reunite with Yumi after all this time, though the moment is quickly cut short when the masterminds behind the conspiracy, Jingu and Nishiki, finally make themselves known. Even though neither antagonist stands a chance against the reborn dragon, Jingu's actions leads to the death of himself, Nishiki, and Yumi. Broken, Kiryu considers turning himself in, believing that he has nothing else to live for. Yet through the events that took place over the previous few days, he found someone new to live for, Haruka. To ensure her well-being, he immediately resigns from his position as the fourth chairman, starting a massive trend of him running away from his problems. At least this time, it won't bite Kiryu in the ass just yet. He and Haruka deserve that rest after what they went through. Even though she's just a 9-year-old girl, Haruka finds herself at the center of the 10 billion yen conspiracy. After being given a pendant by Yumi, she escapes an orphanage to search for her missing mother. Luckily for her, this brings her closer to Kiryu, allowing them to bond over the course of the game. Most of the time, this usually requires Kiryu to rescue her from whatever villain of the day has kidnapped her, but they do get to enjoy the occasional quiet moment with each other. Eventually, the two of them realize that Haruka's real mother is Yumi and rush to meet her before things go from bad to worse. And while they do get the chance to meet her, she unfortunately becomes one of the many casualties of this game. At least now, Haruka has a proper parental figure in Kiryu to guide her after enduring so many tragedies at such a young age. Makoto Date is an unlikely ally of Kiryu's that becomes one of his closest as the two of them start to piece together what really happened. Initially, he comes off like your average cop with a disdain for your criminal groups like the Yakuza. But after interrogating Kiryu and realizing something is off with his account of the Dojima murder, he attempts to discover the truth before being demoted. Nevertheless, he continues to go against members of the police force trying to prevent him from solving the mystery behind the missing 10 billion yen alongside Kiryu. Interestingly, the story diverts about halfway in to focus on his strained relationship with his daughter, Saya, likely a result of his obsession with finding out the truth surrounding the Dojima murder. On first playthrough, it might seem odd as to why this was included into the game, but it makes sense with the entire story in mind. A notable chunk of the cast in this game are fathers, with each of them making their fair share of mistakes, some more than others. I'll get to you in a moment. Upon seeing how they failed and how people like Date managed to rebuild these relationships, Kiryu learns what is expected of him once he adopts Haruka, allowing for him to hopefully be the best father he can for her. Kazuki and Yuya are the managers of Stardust and work alongside Kiryu to aid him in his quest, even if his relationship with Yuya starts off a bit rocky. Regardless, they provide a pivotal role by catching Kiryu up to speed and fighting alongside him in a few of the fights. Early on, it's revealed that Kazuma was the man who taught Kazuki what he knows and helped him make Stardust as big as it is today, showing just how much influence Kazuma has on Kamurocho. At least these two escape the story without dying like Tachibana. Reina returns from Yakuza 0 with a much more significant role this time around. Still in charge of Serena, she spends most of her time hanging around Kiryu, Nishiki, and Yumi. This all falls apart after Dojima's death, seems like a running theme here, with Kiryu going to jail, Nishiki focusing on running his family, and Yumi disappearing. Once Kiryu returns, she immediately offers to help him out and even allows him to use Serena as a home base. Despite her friendly facade, she works against Kiryu by informing Nishiki what his sworn brother is up to at several points simply because she has unrequited feelings for him. Before long, she starts to feel remorse for her actions and attempts to murder Nishiki to atone. All this results in is her unfortunate demise, marking another victim of this already bloody conflict. Shinji Tanaka starts off as another one of Kiryu's allies, serving under him in the Dojima family. When shit hits the fan, Kazuma transfers him to the Nishikiyama family to serve as a spy. In this new role, he relays information to Kiryu as well as helps him get into places like Sarah's funeral. He also exhibits his honor, likely inspired by Kiryu, by helping Reina escape after a failed assassination attempt on Nishiki despite her previous role. This doesn't stop him from facing the same fate as her only moments later. It just goes to show you that the Yakuza lifestyle doesn't care how old or young you are, you'll die all the same. The Flores Sai is a legendary informant that has eyes just about everywhere in Kamurocho. If you even step one foot in there, chances are he's already seen you. For this game, he doesn't do much besides supply Kiryu with information after he hits a dead end and cracking the case behind the missing 10 billion yen. Although, we get to see another example of how not to be a parent with his lackadaisical attitude towards his son. He still does care about him though. Sohei Dojima only appears in 2 scenes and is dead in both of them, yet his death plays a significant role that I must mention. Throughout the game, you see countless instances of how pissed off many of the former Dojima family members are at Kiryu for his death, effectively create a stigma that Kiryu has to bear for the entire game, something he only chose to do out of love for Nishiki. In the end, his selflessness only made Nishiki hate him more. Shintaro Kazuma actually has some screen time in this game where we get to see him lead the Kazuma family as well as the Dojima family after the fallout of the Empty Lot incident. He's praised a ton for his status in the clan as well as his past as the clan's best hitman, something he seemingly regrets. Once he reunites with Kiryu to inform him on what has happened over the past 10 years, he gets shot and is quickly shut down the story, only reappearing in the second to last chapter. Before his death, he reveals to Kiryu that he, Sarah, and Yumi all conspired against Jingu and that the 10 billion yen actually belongs to him, as well as the fact that he killed Kiryu's, Nishiki's, and Yumi's parents, sending him to the orphanage to ensure they all had a place to grow. And that's basically all we get on Kazuma throughout the series. I wish we got to see why he had this change of heart, but unless we get another prequel, I doubt we will. Still, a man can dream. Similarly, third chairman of the Tojo clan Masaru Serra is alive for only one scene before getting killed off-screen in the second chapter. Fortunately, we still learn more about his past, including his connection to Jingu. These ties run so deep that he almost goes through with murdering Yumi before Kazuma stops him. Together, they draft his will in the event that the chairman dies, paving the way for Kiryu to lead the clan. I wonder how these guys feel in the afterlife. As the only major figure of the Omi Alliance to play a significant role in this game, Yukiko Terada has some big shoes to fill. At first, it seems as if he's working with each side to see which one benefits him the most, but in reality, he's just another one of the many people that owes a debt to Kazuma. Honestly, it's getting pretty funny how many people Kazuma has helped off-screen that we never get to see, but I digress. After everything is said and done, Kiryu appoints him as the 5th chairman of the Tojo clan for his loyalty to Kazuma in the story. While we don't know it yet, this will end up being another one of the numerous mistakes Kiryu makes in trying to separate himself from the Yakuza as fast as possible. Junichi Sudo serves as an antagonistic party to Date on the police force, eventually joining his side once he figures out what's really going on with the 10 billion yen. He might have a minor role, but it filters out the world a bit by showing us exactly how law enforcement is reacting to the actions of the Yakuza. While not a major criticism of Zero, everything regarding the police in that game was told to us rather than shown, so I appreciate the attempt here. Normally, I would have mentioned Hiroshi Hayashi, Koji Shindo, and Katsuto Arase, but seeing as they reappear in future games, it would be wrong if I didn't. In this game, the three of them only appear in one scene to serve as the boss fight for the chapter, with Shindo also briefly appearing in a flashback scene, before disappearing for the rest of the game. And that's kinda it. Stick around for the Kiwami 2 video if you want me to go more in depth for two of them. Lao Kao Long, the leader of the Snake Flower Triad, almost falls victim to the same trap, but gets just a bit more time in the spotlight. A schemer first and foremost, he works alongside whoever he needs to and harbors a deep hatred for Kiryu, using the gangs of Kamurocho to kidnap Haruka. His role in this game ends after he is beaten, but perhaps we'll get more to do in future games. Can I just say I'm disappointed with how Futoshi Shimano was handled in this game? Of course, this game's story was made first, so it isn't Kiwami's fault, but man does he kinda suck. Outside of a flashback scene made for this game in one business deal, he only comes off as a brute that relies on his strength to get what he wants. And to make matters worse, he has very little screen time because of the countless other antagonists in this game, exacerbating this issue. At least his tattoo is a very fitting tiger. In Japanese mythology, dragons and tigers are viewed as equals on par with each other in strength. Some wondered that he'd fight Kiryu, while other characters utilize this motif better in my opinion. Rest in piss, Shimano. Yumi Sawamura is Kiryu and Nishiki's love interest and one of the key players in the 10 billion yen mystery. After losing her memory once Doju was killed, she falls in love with Jingu and gives birth to Haruka. It ends up being short-lived, with Jingu breaking up with her to pursue his desire for power. She then assumes the identity of Mizuki, Yumi's sister, to protect herself from any future attempts on her life. Despite how important she is to Kiryu, she only appears in the first and last chapters and then takes a bullet to save the man she always loved and her daughter, dying not long after. On her upper chest, she has a tattoo of the Queen of the Night flower, which blooms only once a year. Much like the flower, she was given the chance to reunite with the two people she cared about the most for one night before she tragically passed away. Like many things in this game, I wish we got to see more of her, but it just wasn't meant to be that way. Kyohei Jingu is the man behind it all. From the shadows, he manipulates everyone from the Chojo clan to the Omi Alliance to even the police. The extent of his power seems endless, and yet he seems hungry for more. There's no better way to describe him. And that's kinda it. While he's foreshadowed a lot throughout the story and is responsible for several major deaths during the finale, he's a cardboard cutout of the weak, power-hungry villain that has no morals trope that is used quite a bit. He's a decent first attempt, but a lot of other characters executed quite better. Doesn't help his reputation that his boss fight is annoying as hell too. Finally, Akira Nishikiyama has changed significantly from the last time we saw him. Following Dojuma's death, he's set on a downward spiral that never seems to end. His underlings treat him like crap, and everyone complains about how much better Kiryu is compared to him. All the while, he has to come to terms with his sister's death after her doctor scanned him. It's no wonder he developed such an inferiority complex, especially with that tattoo on his back. As anyone who has played Pokemon knows, there's a popular legend about a red koi swimming up the waterfall to become a dragon. For Nishiki, the waterfall he has to climb is the Tojo clan hierarchy. Without any of his closest friends, Nishiki becomes a bitter man, consumed by a desire to reach the top no matter the cost. Ironically, this blinds him from seeing Reina's feelings for him simply because he yearns for Yumi's love instead. He inflicts the same pain he endured onto other people. So long as he is able to reach the top of the totem pole and finally take control over everything for once in his life, nothing else matters. In the final battle, he is enveloped in a dark blue heat aura that greatly contrasts that red aura surrounding Kiryu's dragon style. In his pursuit of power, Nishiki has forgone everything that could have let him rise to that position in the first place and sealed his fate. Yet, in his final moments, he remembers how life used to be and betrays Jingu to save Kiryu and Haruka, taking his own life in the process. Despite all of the suffering he went through and inflicted onto others, he pulled himself out of the hole he created for one moment to prove that deep down, he still cared about Kiryu and Yumi. This tale is truly a tragic and powerful one about how power can consume anyone and make them a worse person. There's no denying that he set a high bar for all the other villains he strived to surpass. And I believe that's everyone relevant in this game. That didn't take as long as I thought, so I hope I did it. Oh, right. Well, I guess it's time to talk about you. Majima is a peculiar case in Yakuza Kiwami. In the original game, he only appears in 3 scenes, 2 of them being boss fights. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if most people thought he just died or something, considering how he just passes out after the second battle with him. However, for Kiwami, they decided to do something a little different. I believe the conversation went a little something like this. Okay guys, so Yakuza Zero did extremely well and made us Yakuzillion dollars. Any of you got any ideas on how we can make Yakuza Kiwami as successful as Zero? Well, you know how he gave Majima a major role and also had a mini-boss that roamed the map? Yeah, what about it? What if we combine them into one system for Kiwami? You're a fucking genius. And thus, Majima Everywhere was born. Nowhere in Kamurocho is safe for the mad dog showing up to have some fun with his Kiryu-chan. Typically, encounters with him either result in a fight or a minigame where you go up against Majima. As I mentioned before, the main method to unlock skills for the Dragon Style is through these encounters with Majima. Otherwise there wouldn't be an incentive to fight him over 50 times. Luckily, RGT realized it might be tedious to fight the same guy that many times, so they decided to give him access to all 4 of his styles from Yakuza 0. Unfortunately, he can't switch styles during a fight, outside of main story battles, but the fact that it's possible in the first place makes these fights much more enjoyable. If that was my only criticism for this bonus edition, then this section wouldn't exist, but we don't live in a world where that is the case. Certain skills require fighting a specific Majima, whether it be him using a specific style or wearing a specific costume, and it can be a bitch to find the one you're looking for sometimes. If you fuck up and lose the fight, you have to redo the process over again, which got me to stop playing the game briefly a couple of times. On top of this, his maximum health increases the higher your rank is, eventually reaching the same amount as the final boss. While it makes sense in lore that Majima would have that much health, it's really fucking annoying when you accidentally run into him after not saving for a while, debating whether or not to try to win or reload and lose all of your progress. Worst of all, some parts of it feel incredibly out of character for Majima. As everything involving him in the main story is untouched, it almost feels as if there are 2 different Majimas that exist at the exact same time. The psychotic and sadistic mad dog in the main story, and the silly and playful goofball for the side content. Sure, it's mostly in character for him, but it still comes off as a bit jarring to see the same guy dressed up as an idol holding a woman at knife point. Hell, it makes Kiryu feel out of character by leaving Majima to die just so they can preserve the twist that he appears for another boss fight after receiving a fatal injury. Kiryu would not abandon Majima even if he was trying to find someone like Kazuma, especially after he tried to help him. The best way to fix this would be probably to prevent Majima from showing up between his 2 boss fights, even if that removes him from most of the game. It's not a great option, but it's certainly better than what they did. Based on all of this, I wouldn't be surprised if anyone believes that I hate this edition. But I don't. I think it's a great concept that unfortunately wasn't handled properly. Perhaps if they were given more time they could have improved it, but this is what we got and I can't help but be somewhat disappointed by the final product. Yakuza Kiwami's Substories are another one of the downgrades from Zero, lacking a lot of the charm that made those ones stand out. The common trend in these substories is people trying to scam Kiryu, with 12 out of the 78 following this formula, coming out to just over 15%. To make up for this, a lot of the more significant ones feature voice acting and animated cutscenes, something Zero lacked. The undeniable standouts this time around are the Yakuza's wife, Behind the Assassin, The Fake Mizuki's Truth, and My Baby's a Showgirl, as each of them expands on an aspect of the story that is ignored due to time constraints. I can't fault the game too much for the stinkers that drag down the great substories, as this was their first time doing this. At the same time, I can't just use that as a defense when the rest of the series is clearly superior. Joey Moon returns as a super boss for this game, marking the first time he and Kiryu clash, though he isn't pulling any punches. Much like his bout with Majima, he has 2 phases where he uses each of their signature styles, starting with Dragon and ending with Mad Dog. The first phase isn't all that different besides the grenades he tosses after each attack he blocks. Just time your tiger drops and he should go down pretty easily. The second phase though, that's where he really picks up the pace. It's much harder to successfully pull off a tiger drop, and each time you fail usually results in losing most of your health bar. I found myself abusing heat actions once he got into his face, and thank God I did. Otherwise I would have been stuck here for quite a while. I think it took me an hour or so to finally beat Joe, roughly the same time it took me to beat him and so Kiwami in Yakuza 0. While they may be a step down from Yakuza 0, Dispatch of Substories laid the groundwork for the rest of the series, so they did something right at least. The Coliseum and Climax battles are among the returning features from Yakuza 0, but don't think that means it's a simple retread from what was in that game. The Coliseum has an entirely new set of opponents to face off against, the only exception being Komaki. The super boss for this iteration is Masasami Onitake, who uses Shibusawa's brawler moveset. He's not that hard to deal with, not even being the most difficult opponent in this version. Overall, I felt as if it took me less time to reach the max rank than in Yakuza 0, but that might be because it was broken up like Komaki training sessions instead of being done all at once. Climax battles, on the other hand, felt infinitely harder than the ones from the previous game. Millionaire battles were fought for Mad Dog battles, proving my theory on how Majima everywhere came to be. Some of them felt very cheap, requiring nigh-perfect gameplay to complete them. Proving Grounds once again offers one of the hardest challenges in the game, even though you only have to take out 5 guys in a minute and a half. That would be easy if your health and heat weren't constantly draining and the enemies didn't gang up on you as much as they did. Melee Battle 10 is another difficult one, pitting you against multiple waves of enemies and 2 of the bosses from Yakuza 0. I spent the most amount of time on this one since you have to wait for Sarah to attack, otherwise he encounters your every attack. Everything afterwards is a piece of cake as you're fully upgraded, meaning there's very little most of the enemies can do to you. These 2 additions once again wrap up everything in a nice little bow to close out the experience. Although, I got one last surprise that I want to quickly go over. Like a Dragon Yakuza is an adaptation of the first game that came out on Amazon Prime in the fall of last year. Unlike Yakuza Kiwami, the story only takes the broad strokes of the original to craft its own unique take on it. I figured if I were to talk about it, the video on the remake of the first game would be the best place to do so. So here are my brief thoughts on it. For anyone who hasn't watched it, this is your spoiler warning for the show. Skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to be spoiled. Otherwise, here we go. I wanted to like the show, and I did at first, but man did the finale kinda shit the bed in so many ways. It drags it down from being a good to mid show. To start off with the positives, I really like what they did with Miho, Nishiki's sister in the show, and Yumi. They're given a lot more depth and time in the spotlight to be actual characters, which is something I really appreciated, especially because we never got to see Nishiki's sister in the game. And even though I disliked how the finale went, it did feel like the most Yakuza part of the show with the Tojo and Omi fighting outside the Millennium Tower. So that's a plus. I think that's everything positive I have to say about it, unfortunately, so on to the negatives. Several characters, most notably Shimano and Chibusawa, are nothing like their game counterparts, and no, I'm not referring to their appearances, because it just feels like those names were shoved on to say, hey, these characters are in the show. Just make them original characters instead of pulling that shit. Majima is also marketed very heavily for the show, something that makes sense considering how beloved he is, yet he only appears for around 10 minutes in a show that takes 4.5 hours to watch. It almost feels like false advertising considering how it was actually treated. Lastly, the finale was a shit show that felt so fucking rushed. I know I just praised the massive fight, but the actual story behind the fighting just sucked. 41 minutes was too short and there should have been probably another 5 to 10 minutes to flesh it out, but man did what we get stink. Ironically, most of these complaints might come from already knowing the story. I watched it alongside someone who has no experience with the series and they really enjoyed seeing how it played out. Though this probably isn't the best thing considering it's an adaptation, it was never going to be a one-to-one remake, especially when Kiwami already exists. I'd give the show a 6.5 out of 10 for the stuff it does well. Also, people hate on the show way too much even though it's an alright show. Maybe a season 2 could be infinitely better and fix these flaws, but only time will tell. For now, it's time I wrap up this video. Yakuza Kiwami is a very flawed game, and there's no denying that. Some of these flaws stem from the original story that it retells for modern audiences, while others come from the additions included to spice up the experience in the original. No matter which angle you look at this game from, you'll find something that just doesn't work. For this reason, I find Yakuza 0 to be the better game out of the two. It's just a much better experience that is less holding it back from greatness. But don't take this as me hating Yakuza Kiwami. I absolutely love this game for what it is. I still had fun during the final Majima fight even though I had already fought him from anywhere from 50 to 100 times because of the Majima Everywhere system. I enjoyed seeing the special treatment certain Substories got that was preserved from the original game, as well as the ones made from this game that explain things that the first game glossed over. I even shed a tear when Nishiki took his own life to protect Kiryu and Haruka from Jingu despite staying up until 9 AM in the morning to complete the game. Yakuza 1 was the game that gave birth to a series that I adore and appreciate to this day. Without these flaws, the rest of the series wouldn't be able to improve upon them and grow to reach the success it has now. Not every game has to be a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Hell, even a 9 out of 10 for me to enjoy it. If Yakuza Kiwami is the main way I get to experience the original story that sparks so many other games, then I'm glad it was how I did so. So thank you. Thank you Yakuza Kiwami for giving me the chance to play through the very beginning of the Yakuza franchise. I wouldn't have it any other way. Once again, I'd like to thank anyone who reached this point in the video. This video took much less time to make, but I think its quality should surpass the quality of the Yakuza 0 video. Regardless of which video you prefer, don't be afraid to let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and consider subscribing if you haven't already, which I know applies to a lot of you. As to be expected, Yakuza Kiwami 2 is the next video in the series, so I hope to see you all there. Enjoy the rest of your day, night, or whatever, and take care.